The play Hamlet, written by Shakespeare, tells the tragic story of Hamlet's quest to seek revenge on his father's murderer. After the recent death of his father, Hamlet discovers that the king had not been bitten by a snake, but rather a sly relative. Hamlet is told by a ghost that his father was killed by his uncle, Claudius. Claudius not only stole King Hamlet's throne, but shortly after, Claudius married Hamlet's recently widowed wife, Gertrude. Hamlet is enraged and confused, and as a result, experiences an internal conflict. Hamlet wants to punish Claudius for his violent and incestuous acts, but is haunted by indecision. Hamlet's conflicting characterization leads him to his downfall, and ultimately his identity crisis, in which he transforms from a loyal son into a dead killer. Hamlet fills a variety of roles throughout the play. Hamlet can be seen as protective, vindictive, philosophical, and suicidal at different moments in the play. The combination of Hamlet's different personalities sets him on a path to madness. Primarily, Hamlet is very loyal to his late father and wants to protect his memory and honor the former king. In his first soliloquy, in Act 1, Scene 2, Hamlet explains that his father was so excellent a king, that was to this Hypersian to a satyr. Basically, Hamlet is saying that his father was very accomplished and was both a respectable king and husband. He then goes on to say that the king was very protective of his wife and made sure she was safe, and says that he might not beware the winds of heaven visit her face too roughly. Hamlet looks up to these qualities in his father and wishes to protect his legacy and continue to protect the throne, just as his father protected Gertrude and Denmark. In Act 1, Scene 4, Hamlet worries about his reputation and the reputation of Denmark. Hamlet is embarrassed by the drunkenness of others, including Claudius, saying that it takes from our achievements, though performed at height, the pith and marrow of our attribute. Hamlet wants to continue Denmark's path to excellence and follow in his father's footsteps. While Hamlet is protective of his father's legacy, he internalizes negative thoughts surrounding the grieving of his father's death and seemingly inappropriate interfamilial relations. Hamlet considers suicide at multiple points in the play. Even from Hamlet's first soliloquy, he considers killing himself. Hamlet wishes his current situation would resolve itself into a do. He wants to be reduced to total oblivion. The only thing that holds Hamlet back at this point is the belief that suicide is against God's word. Later, in Act 2, Scene 2, Hamlet yet again feels empty and emotionless. After seeing the actors cry over Hecuba, a fictional character, Hamlet is embarrassed that he, too, cannot produce these emotions. He asks himself, "Am I a coward?" and ultimately decides that he is. Hamlet has a valid reason to be upset, yet he is numb of emotions and cannot produce the sadness that actors could artificially sob over for hours. During the soliloquy, he compares himself to a prostitute and the other lower-class people. Hamlet's suicidal thoughts reach a peak in Act 3, Scene 1, during his famous "To be or not to be" soliloquy. Hamlet is deciding whether he should keep his suffering to himself and endure his pain, or if he should kill himself to end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. He is comforted by the idea of death and romanticizes suicide, making it seem like a dream, rather than a nightmare. Hamlet asks himself, for who would bear the whips and scorns of time, when you could so easily kill yourself? He wonders what makes people endure life for so long. After asking himself these heavy, existential questions, he comes to the conclusion that fear of the unknown and lack of knowledge regarding the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns is what drives people to continue living. At this point, when Hamlet acknowledges his own hesitations, it becomes evident that he is rather philosophical, especially for the time period. Hamlet sheds light on a question that so many ask themselves, but rarely vocalize. Hamlet wonders about death throughout the play in its entirety, but comes face to face with it in Act 5, Scene 1. Hamlet stares at his old jester, Yorick's skull, on the ground. While he is fond of their memories, he recognizes that everyone is the same in death. Successful and important people, like Alexander the Great, died, were buried, and returneth to dust. Similarly, Caesar died and simply turned to clay. Hamlet alludes to Alexander the Great and Caesar to demonstrate man's mortality. In a sense, this scene is somewhat ironic because as we read Hamlet, we are reading a story and legacy that outlives their death. By the end of this scene, Hamlet shows another side of himself and angrily attacks Laertes in the hole in the ground dug for a grave. Throughout the play, Hamlet is vindictive and is content with seeking revenge. In Act 4, Scene 4, line 69, Hamlet exclaims, "My thoughts be bloody or be nothing worth." He feels strongly about killing Claudius. Even though he hasn't followed through, these thoughts remain on his heart constantly. In this scene, with Laertes and Hamlet fighting in the graveyard, Hamlet's anger and vengeful behavior is expressed through physical fighting. Hamlet is constantly aggravated by the circumstances, but due to the combination of his thoughts and feelings, is unable to take action until the final scene. Hamlet's vindictive attitude is present in the whole play, but is challenged by his philosophical and suicidal thoughts, along with his goal to honor his dead father. This identity crisis is one that fuels Hamlet's indecision and causes him to act tragically late in the play. His downfall was directly triggered by his internal confusion and ever-changing mental state, ultimately leading to his death.